Hey everyone! So a while ago I made this video talking about this Anki plugin that is called Movies to Anki. And in that video I talked about a media player that works with that plugin. That media player is called mpv player. And I just decided to make a separate video talking about that player specifically because it's a really good one. I personally switched to it from VLC player that I used previously. And there's multiple reasons for that. Like one of the reasons was that I was using that plugin, and it was just one of the things that I was using, and I got used to the player, and so I just decided to use it regularly. And another reason was that it was really lightweight, and I like having software that doesn't run any unnecessary stuff. And although VLC player is very lightweight as well, mpv player is even more so. And that's another reason why I decided to switch, so it's more lightweight. And the third reason is that it's very customizable and very configurable. You can do so many things with it. You can configure it to work exactly the way you want it to. You can change pretty much every aspect of how things appear on the screen. You can use various scripts, third-party scripts that are available online that you can download, and by doing that, extend the functionality of your mpv player installation. So today I just decided to quickly walk through my own setup and show you how you can set it up as well. I'll also show you some scripts that I wrote myself that are helpful for language learners. So without further ado, let's go over to the computer. And over here in the browser I have the mpv player's web page pulled up. This is the manual page, and the home page looks like this. The address is mpv.io. Yeah, and by the way, I already talked about the installation of the mpv player in that Movies to Anki tutorial. And so if you've never installed, or if you, basically if you, for the general information on the installation of the mpv player, I'll leave a link in the description to that video, and that will explain how to install it. So over here, in this video we'll just focus on the setup and usage. So let's go over to, so we went to this home page, mpv.io, and if you go to the reference page and then choose over here stable and click on this HTML link, you'll get to the manual. And basically the reason that I start with this manual is that you can find anything, answer to almost any question about how to use a certain feature of mpv player here in this manual. It's all right here, and it's very easy to search, but we'll get to it in just a second. So right now let's go over to this folder with a bunch of videos that I have over here. These are just some free videos that I downloaded from Wikipedia for us to have some samples to work with. And so basically, just to start with something, let's just open one up. So actually, hold on a sec. I forgot to change the profile that I use for this tutorial, and the one that I use is left 1/2. There we go. Okay, so if we open the video now, it'll just appear in the normal proportion that I need for this tutorial to fit the screen capture on the screen the way I want. But the point is, basically, this is the mpv player, this is the video window, and over here on the bottom you have a little control panel. And this is it. You also have various menus over here But there's very few options actually in those menus. And the main way you work with MPV player and change all the configurations is you do that by editing the configuration files. So I'll close this player for now, and I'll open up the text editor over here. I'm using Atom text editor, but you can use any text editor you want. And basically, MPV player stores its files in a certain location, which is this location, your home directory, then .config folder, and then MPV folder. So if that folder is not created after the installation, you can create it yourself. It's fine for it to be empty, but once you create certain configuration files there, they will affect how the MPV player behaves once you launch it. So over here, I have my MPV folder, and here I have a bunch of folders and a bunch of files, but we'll focus right now only on these two files because these are actually the main ones, mpv.conf and input.conf. So what do they do? Basically, mpv.conf, I'll close this sidebar for now. So mpv.conf is basically your configuration. It's like preferences window in a program that has it. Here you set all the options. And by the way, if you've never used a piece of software like this before, which has lots of configuration files and options that you need to type up, don't worry, it's not at all complicated. I'll explain to you exactly how it works and how you can find the relevant options to set up things the way you want. But right now I'll just go over the general layout of things. And so the second file is input.conf, and well, like the name suggests, this file contains all of your key bindings and well, keyboard shortcuts that you can change from the defaults or and set up your own. So this is what input.conf does. So we have these two configuration files. Now let's see how we can actually start using those to configure our player. So I mentioned that this manual page is very useful, and well, you can search this page very easily by simply pressing Control F or Command F on a Mac, and this is just basically searching text in your browser page. So if we open up this manual page, we'll see there's a lot of stuff in here. So I'll go over certain options as I explain my own configuration, and hopefully it will become clearer as I go through it. And there's really nothing extremely complicated here. It's just that there's a bunch of like small things that you can change, and I'll explain why those are useful. So I'm on a Mac, and certain things that I'm talking about are gonna apply possibly only to Mac, but most of them will apply to any operating system. And MPV can work on Mac, Windows, or Linux. So that's also a great thing about it. Although a VLC can also do that, of course, as well. So let's see. Let's just skip over this profile line for now. I'll explain what it does later. So we have this no native FS thing, and it says here what it does. It disables native macOS full screen. So basically, on macOS, if you use native full screen, it will open up as a separate desktop, almost like you'll have to kind of switch to it using the same way you would switch to a different desktop. But I don't quite like it. I just want the player to fill up the screen, and this is what it does. So if you also prefer that, this is also quite a bit faster than opening up a separate desktop, because there's like a transition that like expands it, and then voila, there's that full screen. Don't really need that. You just need to switch it to the full screen, and this does it immediately. So that's the reason I use that. Input write alt gr equals no. Forgot what the gr stands for, but basically this makes write alt key work with key bindings. And oh yeah, when you're editing these configuration files, you can add comments by putting a hash symbol and then just typing out your comment. So no keep aspect window. This just allows resizing the video player to any dimensions you want. Pretty simple. And just to go back to the manual for a second, let's just take a look at how they explain these options. Like for example, this no keep aspect window. Here it is. So it explains here exactly what it does, and all the options that MPV player supports are listed here. So that's the reason this manual is very useful, because it has all the explanations and actually the syntax, like the specific things that you need to type up, are all listed here. So you'll also notice that these start with these two dashes, and in my config file I don't use the dashes, and the dashes you need for when you use MPV player from command line. I don't know if I'll go into that in this tutorial. Maybe I'll go into it briefly, but you can also use MPV player from command line, and I personally do that quite a lot. But if you're used to something that uses GUIs, graphical user interfaces, then you can do that as well. You don't need to use command line to use MPV player, and I've used it without the command line for quite a while as well. So let's see, where were we? The config file. So I'll skip over this. If you're curious what it does, you can look it up in the manual. Just for the sake of keeping this tutorial short, I'll focus on the options that are kind of the most important. So now let's talk about the profile a bit. Basically, profile is a set of configurations that you can restrict and only use in certain situations. Like for example, right now I'm recording this tutorial, and I have my this profile option set to left 1/2, and here I have my left 1/2 profile, where I have a couple of options set so that the player looks good in the tutorial in the specific screen position that I want it to appear in. So because it is here in the beginning of the config file, and I say here profile is left 100, left 1/2, then it reads this line and it then loads all of the configs from this profile left 1/2. And so I have a bunch of them here, as you can see, but all these do is just set different dimensions for the player that I want to use. Like normally I use this one, max size. It just fills. It doesn't do the full screen, but it goes to the maximum size. It maximizes the window, basically. That's how I do it normally. And well, let's talk about this geometry option, because it's quite an important one if you want to set up your player to appear, to pop up in the exact way that you want. So again, the way that you figure out how to use an option is you just go to the manual and you can just type --, because they are all listed with dashes here, and geometry. Okay, so here we have the thing, like the pretty long entry here, that explains everything that it does. It explains how to set up the proportions that you want here, or specific dimensions in pixels. You can use percentages or pixels. So it'd take quite a long time for me to explain like every single detail of this thing. But if you just read through it and kind of just think about it for a while, it shouldn't be too hard to understand if you've never come across such descriptions, like syntax descriptions like this. And yeah, so anything you want, you can look up in the manual. But my option, like, let's just focus on what is happening right now. So it loads the left one half profile, and here I got my geometry setting. So it sets the width of the player to 50%. Then there's this X that separates the width and height, obviously. And then I set the height to 1,000 pixels. And well, the reason I set it to 1,000 pixels is just because that my screen happens to be that height. Like the space that I want it to appear in is 1,000 pixels. If you're on a Mac, it might be useful to know that the menu bar on top here is 24 pixels tall, and the dock on the bottom, my dock, I just make it 56 pixels. So I have 1,000 pixels left out of the 1,080, which is the normal height. So that's the reason it's 1,000. Might be useful to you if you want to set up something similar. Alright, so that's the profile of geometry. And here you can see also you can chain profiles one after another. Here I have, again, I set profile to text max. Let's take a look what text max does. It sets the subtitle font to 60, font size to 60, and it sets the margin below the subtitles to 60 pixels as well. So as you can see, like in different profiles, like this one that I use normally, which expands the player to the full, to the maximum size, the player window to the maximum size. Here I use this text max profile, which sets almost all the same stuff. This one, font size and this margin, but just to different values. I think I pointed to this one, but like actually the one that gets loaded right now as I'm recording this tutorial is this one, text smaller, because we're here now and text smaller gets loaded. So that's the setting that we're using. And let's actually take a look at what those do. So I'll go ahead and go back to my folder over here, and we'll open up the player again, or the video. So let's see what we have, what we got. So subtitle font size is 40. Let's just skip ahead once the subtitles start to appear. So here are the subtitles. And I have a margin over here so that this panel below doesn't cover them when it pops up. And what else do I have set in there? OSD font size. This is also something to kind of to know about MPV players. So OSD stands for on-screen display. And what it is basically messages that MPV player can show you while it's open, just on top of the video. So here's an example of a thing that on-screen display does. So right now I'm hitting F8, and if I hold it, it's not going to disappear, but if I let it go, it disappears. This is a default key binding, and what it does, it just prints the playlist onto the screen, and the arrow shows the current video that I'm playing. And so this OSD font size sets this font to 18 pixels height. So I have my subtitles set to 40 pixels and OSD to 18. So F8 shows you the playlist. F9 shows you all the tracks that are available for this for the file that's being played. So you can see that there is one video track, one audio track, and 2 subtitle tracks. I can change the subtitle track by a key that I changed from the default, so I'll talk about it later. But basically, here's the English subtitle track, and here's the German one. So that's very nice. All right, let's close this for now and go back to our config file and talk about the other options. So let's see, what else do we have here? It's quite difficult to go through all this stuff in the organized way. I think just because of the nature of how this type of application works, because there's lots of options. It's just basically a gigantic list, and as you want to do things, you find the options that you need and you put them in the config file, and it's actually all very well organized. But let's go back to it. So yeah, by the way, the profile, if you don't specify any profile, it loads this profile called default. So the default profile is just called default. Wait, I'm pronouncing it wrong. Default. Now it's default, isn't it? So default, the default profile, OSD font. Yeah, so here I set the font, the actual font that I'm using for the on-screen display and for the subtitles. So I have some notes here that might be useful to Mac users that are running macOS Catalina. I'm running Mojave, and I'm not planning to upgrade, but actually, like, I went through this whole complicated upgrade from High Sierra, and I discovered that I can't use Catalina because it doesn't support 32-bit apps anymore, and I have quite a lot of those, so I'm sticking to Mojave, macOS, and basically this is just a little thing that you might... Okay, let me first talk about, like, in general. In general, you just put the font name in here and then it changes. But like to select a certain type of the font, like bold, italic, whatever, I want to use the bold font here. So I had to go like this: Deja Vu, sans, mono, bold. But actually there's also an option for OSD bold, but it didn't work on macOS Catalina for me. So there's like two ways to change the font weight, it's called, like make it bold. But so you might want to try a couple of ways. And on a Mac, Fontbook is the app that lists all fonts, the default, like the built-in app. And so let me fit it on the screen first. I have everything here. Everything. Okay, and so here you can find. Let's find that font. I'm talking about this because, well, it can be annoying to not be able to find this little thing. So I just decided to mention this. So let's say you want to use this Deja Vu Sans Mono font, and it has four variants. So to use bold, to find out the information about the bold font and its exact name, the exact font name, you can choose it, like select it, and then let's see, go to there's this info button here, and here are all the names listed, and so here's the full name. It says full name here, and yeah, you just use that name. So there you go. And so I also use this source font, which is very good. It's very versatile. It has almost everything that you could possibly want. But it's source Han Mono. So basically you find the font you want, and then here I'm actually using this other name, PostScript. So yeah, that's actually the reason that I wanted let me find the exact thing. Annoys me to talk about something that not exactly the thing that I have in front of me on the screen. So deja vu and source hand mono. Source hand, come on, mono. Yeah, the reason there's so many of them is because this font supports Asian typography fully, Korean, Chinese, and Japanese, and all the different variants. So that's why there's so many fonts. But let me see. So bold is, here it is, and here's this PostScript name. I don't exactly know or remember, and maybe I read a little bit about it, what it exactly means, but basically try one of these names and you should be good. You'll find one that works definitely. So moving on, subtitle border size is set to 5 for me. So what is the border? It's the outline that appears around the text. Can't really see it here. Well, if I expand it to full screen, if I expand it to full screen like this, then you can see it. It's this outline, and it also is present on the OSD as well. So you can set it separately or use the same one. You can configure it all the way you want. It's set as sub border size, and there's also OSD border size option as well. But I'm not using it, and apparently it sets it everywhere. No, it's probably just the default size that shows up. Like when I use my OSD, I can't see it again, man. But yeah, there it is. That's probably the default width of the border for the OSD. So yeah, obviously when you start up your own copy of the MPV player, you're not gonna see the same fonts, so you should select the one you like and just use those. This is the very cool thing about MPV player, like it can change exactly like everything, and you can like set similar stuff up in VLC, for example, another very popular open source media player. But there's way more things that you can configure and customize in MPV, so that's the reason I'm using it. Okay, let's see some more stuff. So here we have more options for the default profile. So again, the default is basically like when you start over here at the top, it's the same as if I set default like this. It's exactly the same. You can omit it if you don't have anything else, but that's what it does. So here I went on like setting options for a bunch of other profiles, and then I go back to default. So that's why I put this line here, because otherwise it wouldn't know that which profile I'm talking about. So here I had the profile 768p max size, and here it ends, and here I continue the options for the default profile. All right, so more options. SID equals 1. It means, let me see. It sets the subtitle track to the first one. So yeah, what this does, it basically, if there are subtitles, show the track one automatically when I open the video. If there is subtitle, just show me the first subtitle track. That's my preference. That's why I said it here. SID stands for subtitle ID. There's also AID for audio ID and VID for video ID, and all those change tracks. We'll see a bit about that when we talk about the input.conf file, about changing those tracks. But if you want a specific track to open, when you start the MPV player, you set it with these options: SID for subtitles, VID, and AID for video and audio. Subfile paths is a useful thing to set up if in the folder that you have your videos, you have also another folder where you keep your subtitles. So if I didn't have all these subtitles right here alongside the videos, but in a separate folder like this, let's say subs, and I moved it over there. If this is the usual thing that I keep my files, I can add here. I also already have this extra subtitles folder that I sometimes have in my files, but I can just add another one, subs. And you don't need the colon, it's just, I put it there just to remind myself what the syntax is. But right here, like this, and if we just go over and open up the video, the subtitles tracks are still loaded. So it loaded them from that folder. I'll put everything back as it was. All right, so this one sets the maximum volume that you can go to when you're using the player. 100% is just the normal volume that the video, that the audio already has, but you can amplify it. Like sometimes files have quiet audio, don't they? So you can set this upper limit to whatever you want. I have it set to 200, so I can make the audio twice as loud if there's a need to do so. And well, we're basically almost done with this mpv.conf file. This is actually a profile that I use for my movies to Anki plugin. And in order to use something like that, you actually have to go into the code of movies to Anki and add some things. Let me know if that's something you're interested in. I'll try to... Well, actually, you know what? I'll probably make another video talking about it later, about how to tweak movies to Anki, because there's a couple of things that you can do. But this is basically for that. It just sets here load scripts to nose, because I don't need to use any scripts, which we'll talk about as well. So MPV player scripts are amazing, and I wrote a few, and I'll show you them, and I'll show them to you, and I'll show you them. Yeah. And I'll show you them. Sounds kind of weird, and I'll show them to you. Okay, so this sets load scripts to now, so it doesn't load any scripts by default, but then I load a couple that I need actually for that setup to work. And this profile is also something that you might want to set up actually, this is perfect. This is a perfect transition to talking about input.conf. So to find out what the keys are called over here, like this says here, mouse button right, mouse button back, forward, up, down, left, right. So to find out, let's say you want to set up your right button, right click to do something. I have it set up to make the video full screen. So, but you don't know what the right mouse button is called in this input.conf. So to find that out, you can use this input test profile. I'll change the profile to input test and we'll see what it does. And we'll just... Yeah, it'll probably work. Yeah, it also basically opened up the video, but
Also, es gibt da dieses super spannende Thema, mit dem du dich ziemlich...
normally I'd launch this profile from the command line. So this is probably not the best way to do it. Let's just do it from the command line then. Also, like mpv player is a player that is kind of intended to be used from the command line. So there's nothing scary about the command line. So basically, here I opened up my terminal. I'm gonna change directory to my desktop. I'm gonna list all the files. Here's my free videos folder. And the same thing that I have opened here in Finder. I'll change directory to free videos as well. Here's all my videos. Actually, I don't need the videos because I just wanted to show you the input test. So I type mpv -profile. So here's how you set the same options that you do over here, like profile equals whatever. And here you can just say profile equals. You don't need to use the quotes. I'll talk about it in a sec. But input test, you do need them sometimes, but I'll hold on a sec. So input test, let's see what it does. There we go, brilliant. So it just opened an empty mpv player window, but as I press buttons right now, like right now I hit space and it shows me information about that button that I pressed. And so if I right click, I see here my mbtn write. Okay, so that's what I need to put into my configuration file to change that setting. If I close this now and go back to my input.conf, I can actually find that mbtn write over here. Here it says cycle full screen, so that's how I have it set up. But I'll talk about it in input.conf in a second. So let's see what, yeah, the quotes. So I have all of these quotes here. This is just basically, at some point I started to put the quotes there because it looks nicer, but you don't really need them. You can just go like this, and it will have the same effect. On the command line, there's a thing where if your argument, like if your argument contains spaces, then you need the quotes to tell the terminal that this thing that you're entering is one word, and this, like, normally the space separates arguments. So like say mpv option 1 equals value 1, option 2 equals, or not, some options don't have these the values, it's just the options, so maybe like this. But maybe, like, let's say you have option 3 equals value with spaces. So this is how you need to do it. Or you can even enclose the entire thing in quotes. This will also work. Or you can enclose even just the spaces in quotes. And this will also work. But yeah, another option is to escape the spaces with backslashes. All of these are identical. It's just a bit of command line. It's kind of a bit too much to go into right now, but I just wanted to show you in general how it works. Hope this makes sense. All right, good. All right, so we went through the mpv.conf file, and now we have input.conf. So in input.conf you set up your key bindings, and there is a default input.conf file. Here it is. and it lists all of the default key bindings that you get with MPV Player when you just install it. And you can get this file by going to a certain page, which I'll find in a second, default input.conf. So this is the page. Here it is, the file. So here you can read and see what the default key bindings are. And like here in my config, I basically first thing I do, I disable the ones that I don't need, because they will conflict with the things that I'm gonna be trying to do later. So let's just go through this input.conf file and see what I have set up here. So left, right, up, down, these are just the arrow keys. And the same keys with Alt, and I also have home and end with Alt. So what do all these do? This is just navigation, basically, seeking. I have here the comment. So this basically sets a bunch of like amounts of seconds that I want to rewind by or fast forward by. Let's just open a video and see what it does. Or basically hitting left goes back 3 seconds. Hitting right goes forward 3 seconds, up, back 10 seconds, forward, down, forward 10 seconds. Then with Alt left goes back 1 minute, 60 seconds. And the right goes 1 minute ahead. Then Alt up goes back 5 minutes, and Alt down goes forward, skips forward by 5 minutes. And then Alt home goes to the beginning of the video, and Alt end goes to the absolute end. So that's the way I have it set up. I guess that's like, we just open the video. Here I'm using Alt right, and it skips ahead if I open up this. By the way, this panel is called, it's not called the panel the way I was calling it, it's called OSC. It's on-screen control or controller or something like that. On-screen controller, I think. Controller sounds more grammatical, so must be that. What am I doing? mpv on-screen controller. There we go. So Adam. Yeah. So where was I? What was I talking about? The on-screen controller. So if I pull it up, I can press Alt right, and it skips ahead by 1 minute, and down 10 seconds. So the same, it does the stuff that I just showed you, that I just showed you in the config. So this is quite useful for language learning. Like in this video, there's a whole bunch of general use stuff, and there's a few things about language learning. So this one is useful for language learning. What it does, it navigates between the subtitle lines. So you can skip not just by time, by seconds, but also by just going to the next or to the previous line. So I'll just open up the video and press Shift right, and I go to the first subtitle line, and then to the second, the third, and so on. And Shift left and goes back. So this is great. This is very useful for language learning. Shift up I have set up to go up, go back 1 chapter, and Shift down to go forward 1 chapter, if there are chapters in the file. Zooming and panning, I'm not going to go into this too much, but basically I have my numpad set up in such a way that I can zoom in and then pan within the video conveniently. Here I can hold command and then I can press plus and I can zoom in, and if I hold command and use basically the number keys as if they were, use them as arrows, I can go to left, to up, or diagonally. Oops. And I also have some keys set up to reset it, but I already forgot what they were. But it doesn't matter because I don't really use it that much often, but sometimes, I don't know, you might have something in the video that you want to look closer at. That helps. This is useful for that. Let me see. So, not going to go into too much detail about this. You can read this config as it is, and then just look up the stuff in the manual. It's all very clear. Like for example, video pan X. If we go back to the manual and just search for it, there it is. Okay, cool. So changing speed, pretty self-explanatory. This decreases the speed by a quarter, so times 0.25, times minus 0.25, and this times plus 0.25. And well, yeah, basically this changing speed, it's pretty clear. Next I have some miscellaneous stuff. Alt page down is goes to the next item in the playlist. So if I open up the video, I also have a script set up that loads all of the videos in the folder into a playlist when you open one of the videos. I'll talk about the scripts in a second. So if I now press Alt page down, I go to the next video. And if I press F8, like I showed you before, I can see the playlist. And here I went to the third one, the fourth one. Here I went one back. So this is that. Oops. Okay. This is quite an important thing to set up. Switching tracks. By tracks I mean subtitle tracks, audio tracks, and video tracks. So I have the key S to set to just show and hide the subtitles. Control S to reload the subtitles. This is useful if you're editing them as you're watching something. Sometimes you might want to do that. Then I have on the Mac meta. I think it's meta. It's meta, isn't it? So meta means meta stands for command key on the Mac. That's what I'm trying to say. So meta plus S. So command S changes the subtitle track, and meta plus capital S, which is the same as meta shift S, is going back. So if I open up a video, and by the way, here on the OSC, the on-screen controller, you can see the audio tracks, the subtitle tracks. You can't see the video tracks, I don't believe. Or wait a second. What is this? This is audio, this is video. Yeah, you can't see the video tracks, but there usually is only one. So I can press S to hide the subtitles or show them. Although I don't have any on the screen right now. There we go. Hide, show. If I press Command S, it goes to the next one, and Shift Command S, it goes back. here we can see the selected tracks. So if I press Command S, we have the second track, and if I go back, Shift Command S, it goes back to the first one. All right. There we go. So this does the same for the audio. Command A, next audio track. Shift Command A, previous audio track. Command V, next video track. Shift Command V, previous video track. And you can also write Shift, I believe, but I use the lowercase and uppercase. Let's see what else do I have here. This makes the player appear always on top. This takes the screenshot. So by now I hope you can read the config, and so I don't need to explain as much. Again, look up anything that you have questions about in the manual. It's really clear. So meta plus I shows the video information. Is quite useful. Actually, just pressing I shows the information, but I have Command I set to. Oh shit! What am I sorry? Yeah, I got confused for a second. So I have this set actually to invert the video. I use this sometimes to watch the videos that are just showing a very bright screen that just shines you right into your eyes, and then your eyes get sore. So you can invert. It's just a filter. Might be also something useful that you might want to use. So this is that. About the info, the thing that I got confused about. So you can view the video info by pressing I. This is the default key binding, and also Shift I to make it just stay on the screen and not disappear. That's how it works. All right. So I have enter and keypad, enter and mouse, right mouse button to set up to switch the player to full screen. This is just it sets the player, like the size of the window, to half the size. It's Alt, yeah. Window scale 0.5. So this is just a minor thing. Quit watch later is a quite useful thing. So if you're watching a video, if you want to save the place where you stopped, let's choose another one. Just I don't know.
Open date.
Let's say I was watching this video and I stopped here. I can press my key binding, which is Command Alt Q, and it will quit. But if I open it up again, it starts up at exactly the same place, and it even paused, like it even kept the paused state as when I quit it. So it saves the exact state of the player for you, and it opens it up when you open up the video that you closed. So you can't just go through the list of the saved states, but when you open up the video, it will open up in the exact place you quit. If you quit with that quit watch later thing. If I just quit, then it'll open it up from the beginning. So that's a useful thing, of course. All right, so far we've talked about mpv.conf file and input.conf file. So these are the main two configuration files that you use to configure MPV player. Also, another cool thing that you can do is that you can add scripts to the MPV player to extend its functionality. And the way you find scripts is, well, you go online, and there's a certain page here, again in the MPV GitHub repo. They already have this huge list of scripts that various people have written and that you can use. So The ones I'd recommend you install pretty much right away are, let's see, so if you go to this black box, click it. This is actually like a suite of scripts that are very useful. And it's called mpv tools. Come on, let's be a bit snappier. All right. So here is a bunch of quite useful scripts that you can use in your MPV player. The ones that I personally use all the time are Blackbox and also Colorbox and cycle video rotate. And the rest are also interesting, but I don't use them as much. So definitely look into this. Let me see. Here's my scripts folder. So basically, you install the scripts in this folder inside your home.config mpv scripts directory. That's where you put them. And let me see. Just something to mention really briefly. When I was researching this stuff, I found out that there was some kind of installation, not the installation, but basically a bug in the Windows version of the MPV player, which prevented the users from using JavaScript scripts in their player. Basically, there's two types of scripts. There's JavaScript, and then there's Lua scripts. So JS is JavaScript, Lua is Lua. And there was this issue. I'm not sure if it's still an issue, but I guess it's worth mentioning because maybe someone... Come on. I guess it's worth mentioning because maybe someone will have a problem. So here's the issue where some users couldn't run JavaScript in their MPV player on Windows. And so they were able to fix it by reverting to this version. So that's something you might want to use if you experience such a problem. So that's that. But let's go back to what we were talking about. So the scripts folder. So you install all of the scripts here. So let's see. For example, if you want to get this MPV tools collection of scripts, you can do so by downloading the code from this repo, or actually just going to releases and downloading the code over here, and then just saving it, unzipping it, and putting all of the scripts into the scripts folder the way that I have it over here. Pretty simple. If you some repos on GitHub won't have the release, the specific release. In that case, I just have to expand my page here. But in that case, let's see. You can click this code, green code button here, and then you can download zip, and that will do exactly the same. Or not exactly the same. It's going to download everything in the repo, and then you can find the scripts in those files. Okay, so let's see what other scripts I have here. I have this autoload.lua script, which is also quite useful. I already mentioned that it loads up all the files that you have in the folder in which the file that you opened is located. So you open a file and it loads up the entire directory into a playlist for you. And it's on this user scripts page. It's just search for autoload.lua, not .lua, just autoload. And you just then go to that page and it actually directs you right to the script, which you can download. By the way, if anyone's confused, I'm using this. If anyone's confused about why GitHub looks so dark, I'm using this dark reader plugin for Firefox, and that's why I prefer it, because it's much easier on the eyes than the light theme. Okay, so it brought us to this page, which is already the file, the script file, and you can download, like, to download a file, like one file from a GitHub repo, you go to the file and then you have this raw button and you right click it and say save link as, and then you just save it like you normally do. And then you have it in your downloads folder over here, like this. So that's how we download a single file from a GitHub repo. Okay, so you put the scripts in this folder, and each script has its own configurations, which you can read about on the page for the script. Also, the script itself, the script file itself, can contain some useful information about how to configure it. Blackbox, Colorbox. Let me see, what shall I talk about first? So let me show you first what they do, basically. So autoload loads the playlist from the current directory. That's already something we already talked about. There it is. And I just opened one file, not all of them. And now the black box is basically a browser for your files. So now I hit Z, the Z key that I have set up over here in my input.conf file, and it loads the black box playlist. Shift Z loads the black box, and then Colorbox I have set to C. So this is how the key bindings work. Just trying to think, where they exactly they have the information on how to set it up. Download requirements. It's somewhere in here. This probably just brings me to the script itself with the file. Yeah, like for example, this file, auto keep GUI open. It has like configuration notes right in the script. So you might have to look around where exactly the instructions are, but there's only a few places to look. So basically, you have this user scripts page where you have just a list of scripts, and then once you are on the page, on the developers page, where the script is, where you download the script from, it will usually have some sort of note. It might be just somewhere over here, like in this README file, or it could be in the script file itself. But basically, somewhere there will definitely be an explanation of how to configure scripts. You also might have noticed that there's like this script settings folder here, and actually now I remember, in case of Blackbox, Colorbox, like all of that bunch of scripts, they already have these examples. So if you download the repo, you'll download the example config files, and here you can set various options. This is the default one, and this one is mine. So you set it up over here. There's lots of options, so I can't go into everything, but it's pretty self-explanatory even if you just look at the code like this. This just sets up how you can control this the black box. Let's see. So if I open it up again, here's the playlist manager, and a Shift Z I have set up to the browser. So this is here's my directory: users Alex Rogers, desktop free videos. And if I press left arrow key, I go back one. I go down one directory. So now I'm in my desktop directory. So this is basically a browser, very useful to just load files directly from the player without having to use the switch to the file manager like this one, Finder, for example. So this is a useful feature. Then Colorbox script is basically allows you to apply certain color profiles to your image, but I actually just found that just setting it up already changes the way that the video looks when you play it, and it made it look much more similar to the way that it looks in the VLC player. So when I was setting it up, that's what I noticed, and I just left it at that setting. So that's the reason I have that script, and that's how I use it. I just leave it at the default, and it just makes the colors look a bit nicer. But there's also a bunch of other settings that you can try out as well. Okay. So this is how you get your scripts. Of course, everyone has different preferences, and different scripts might be useful to you than those that are useful to me. So just look through this page, read the descriptions. They are very clear. You'll definitely find something here that will be useful. All right. So now I'm gonna go ahead and talk about a few scripts that I wrote that are useful for language learning. In particular, those scripts are these ones: copy-subtitle, copy-time-in-seconds, copy-time, and also this osc-show-hide-hotkey. So let's just go through them real quick one by one. I'll start with this one. What this does is very simple. This is not actually a language learning thing. This is just something that I find very useful to have. So if I open up the video, what this script does is if I press the / key, it brings up the on-screen controller. And if I press it again, it hides it. It just toggles the on-screen controller. mpv player on its own doesn't have this option, but I made this script based on some stuff that I found online. So it's not 100% something that I wrote, but it's very simple thing that makes things a bit more convenient. So that's that. Now next, this is the script that is actually useful for language learning. Copy-subtitle, well, quite obviously what it does is just copies the subtitle line, the current one that you see on screen. So for example, if I press Control-C, or not Control-C, Command-C in that case, but it can be set up to any key that you want. So it prints the message here, the subtitle line is copied, and then I can just paste it anywhere. There it is. So something that is useful for when learning languages, like if you're working with Anki and you import subtitles with movies to Anki into Anki, then you might want to search through those subtitles. For example, if you're watching a movie and then you have a certain line that you're interested in, and then you can find it in Anki just by copying it and then pasting it into the Anki search, and that's the way you can find it. That's one of the uses, or making notes or whatever. There's many uses for this type of thing. So, and the other plugins that they're basically the other two, copy-time and copy-time-in-seconds. Again, what they do is they just copy the current timestamp. So I have it set to Alt-Command-C to copy the time in this normal timestamp format, hours, minutes, seconds, milliseconds, or also Shift-Alt-Command-C to copy it in seconds with milliseconds. So this is perhaps something less useful, perhaps something less relevant to language learning, but if you're working with subtitle files in any fashion, this sometimes might come in handy. So that's the reason I made it. And I also made versions for all platforms of these 4 scripts, so you can find them on my GitHub repo, which I'll post the link to in the description to this video. So they're available for macOS, Windows, and Linux. So you can download it and use it. And hopefully it will help your language learning. And hopefully also the MPV player itself will help your language learning in general, because just the way you can customize it, the amount of those options and everything is just so you can set up completely to your preference, and that's just that can be quite important for language learning, because if you're watching lots of videos to learn languages, it makes sense to have the most the environment that works for you the best. So I think that MPV players serves that purpose the best out of all the players that I know of. And it's open source, completely free, available for all platforms. So do use it. I think it's really good. So this is it for this video. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this has been useful to you. Leave some comments to let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.